My name is Victoria. I am 34 years old, and I hold the position of Director of Business Optimization at Viridian Oils Corporation. My role, as I meticulously defined it in the corporate restructure, is to streamline our operational framework, maximize efficiency, and, crucially, to cultivate a professional and progressive work environment. I view the world as an intricate system, one that, with precise calibration and the right set of protocols, can achieve unparalleled levels of performance and ethical conduct. My life, both professional and personal, is a testament to this philosophy. I find solace and power in structure, in the knowledge gleaned from empirical studies and well-articulated policies, rather than the chaotic, often irrational whims of human nature. Vulnerability, emotional reliance, or financial dependence are weaknesses I have systematically purged from my own being, believing them to be anchors that drag down potential. I am, in essence, the modern control architect, designing not just systems, but the very fabric of how success should be woven. My journey to Viridian Oils was a testament to my capabilities. I arrived 3 years ago, quickly identifying the company's latent potential, shackled by what I perceived as antiquated management practices and a loose, almost casual approach to internal decorum. The sales dement inicular was a cacophony of individualistic efforts, lacking a cohesive strategy and, more importantly, a consistent adherence to professional standards. Our product, premium olive oil sourced from sun-drenched groves, deserved a presentation that mirrored its quality, refined, impeccable, and utterly dependable. My first year was dedicated to crafting the Viridian Standard, a comprehensive manual covering everything from client engagement protocols to interdepartmental communication guidelines. I introduced mandatory training modules on professional ethics and emotional intelligence, firmly believing that a well-regulated mind fostered a well-regulated market. My efforts bore fruit, at least superficially. Employee satisfaction surveys showed an uptick in perceived fairness, and our branding underwent a sophisticated overhaul. I was at the peak of my professional ascendancy, confident that I had not only solved Viridian Oil's structural issues, but had also paved the way for a more enlightened approach to commerce within the industry. However, even in my perfectly designed system, there was a persistent anomaly, a top-performing salesperson named Marcus. Marcus was a force of nature, a whirlwind of energy and raw, unbridled salesmanship. His numbers were consistently exceptional, dwarfing those of his peers, bringing in an undeniable percentage of our annual revenue. But Marcus was also, to put it mildly, a disruption. He scoffed at my meticulously crafted Viridian Standard, openly flouted the dress code, and his booming voice, frequently laced with colloquialisms I deemed wholly inappropriate for a professional setting, often echoed through the open-plan sales office. He had a way of charming clients with a gruff, almost paternal demeanor, but his internal interactions were frequently brusque, dismissive, and occasionally bordered on outright rudeness. I saw him not as a valuable asset, but as a dangerous outlier, a vector of potential toxicity in the pristine environment I was so carefully cultivating. His success, I reasoned, was a fluke, an outdated relic of a bygone era that relied on personality over process, charisma over character. It was, in my estimation, unsustainable and, more critically, inherently wrong. My philosophy dictated that the system must always supersede the individual, especially when that individual's conduct threatened the integrity of the whole. Onicularly grating Monday morning, the scent of fresh olive oil wafting from the showroom could barely mask the rising irritation in my gut. I was conducting a routine observation of the sales floor, a practice I implemented to ensure adherence to the new Viridian Standard, when I overheard Marcus on a call. His voice, naturally loud, boomed across the cubicles, punctuated by what sounded like a raucous laugh. "Look, old man," he bellowed into the phone, "you know my olive oil's the best damn liquid gold this side of the Aegean. Stop playing coy and let's get that truck rolling by Friday." Yeah, your wife's got a fancy dinner, I get it. Tell her I said hi. Tell her I sent a complimentary bottle of our reserve blend. Now let's talk numbers, not dinner plans. He hung up with a decisive click, rubbing his hands together. A colleague, young and fresh out of university, flinched at the sound, her eyes darting nervously in my direction. Marcus, oblivious, merely winked at her and began dialing again. My jaw tightened. Old man? Damn liquid gold? Complimentary bottles gifted without formal approval? This was precisely the kind of unregulated, unquantifiable, and utterly unprofessional conduct I had worked tirelessly to eradicate. It wasn't about the sale, not entirely. It was about the method. My theories, derived from countless articles on corporate governance and workplace psychology, dictated that such informal, boundary-crossing behavior, while perhaps yielding short-term gains, ultimately eroded professional trust and established a precedent of permissible deviance. I believed that true, sustainable success lay in consistency, in predictable excellence, not in the erratic brilliance of a single, unruly star. I approached Marcus's cubicle, my posture rigid, a silent sentinel of corporate order. He looked up, a broad, unapologetic grin on his face. "Morning, Victoria," he said, his voice still boisterous. "Just closed another big one. The old man from Apollo Culinary Supplies is in for 300 cases." I forced a tight smile. "Marcus, a word, if you please." "In my office." His grin faltered, replaced by a flicker of annoyance, but he rose, his movements surprisingly agile for a man of his build. Once inside my minimalist office, a sanctuary of muted tones and ergonomic design, I gestured to a chair. "Marcus, we need to discuss your adherence to the Viridian Standard." I placed a copy of the manual, its cover pristine, on my desk. Specifically, Point 2, Professional Communication Etiquette, and Point 1, Client Relationship Management Protocols. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, his eyes scanning the abstract art on my wall rather than the manual. "Victoria, with all due respect, I'm bringing in numbers that your standards could only dream of. My clients like me. They trust me. They buy from me. What's the problem?" "The problem, Marcus," I stated, my voice calm but firm, "is that your methods, while currently yielding results, are not scalable, not replicable, and frankly, they're out of alignment with the professional image we are cultivating for Viridian Oils." Referring to a key client as old man and making unsolicited personal remarks is inappropriate. Gifting company products without formal authorization is a breach of policy. He chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound that grated on my nerves. "They're my clients, Victoria. I've been selling to Apollo for 15 years. They know me. They don't want some stiff, corporate drone reading from a script. They want Marcus." He paused, leaning forward slightly. "And that bottle of reserve blend? It secures loyalty that your policy manual can't even comprehend." His dismissal of my carefully constructed framework, his implied criticism of my approach, felt like a direct assault. He was challenging not just my authority, but my entire worldview. "Marcus," I reiterated, "the company's reputation and the consistency of our brand message must always take precedence over individual preferences. We are building a system here, one that functions seamlessly regardless of who is performing the role. Your methods create an unhealthy dependence on you, rather than on the superior quality of our product and the professionalism of our collective service." I proceeded to cite specific clauses, details, and the potential HR implications of his actions. I mentioned formal warnings, performance improvement plans, and the disciplinary procedures outlined in the Viridian Standard. He listened, his expression growing increasingly bored, occasionally stifling a yawn. When I finished, he merely shrugged. "Do what you gotta do, Victoria. Just don't expect the numbers to keep flowing like they are if you tie my hands." He stood, his presence filling the small office, and walked out without waiting for a dismissal. His defiance, his utter disregard for my authority and my meticulously crafted procedures, solidified my conviction. Marcus was not merely a problem, he was a fundamental threat to the very essence of Viridian Oils as I envisioned it. Over the next few weeks, I meticulously built my case. I implemented a stricter monitoring system for client communication, installing new software that flagged certain keywords and phrases. I reviewed Marcus's sales reports with a fine-tooth comb, not looking for errors in his numbers. Those were consistently flawless, but for any deviation in process or protocol. I interviewed his colleagues, discreetly, of course, noting down every complaint, every instance of an off-color joke, every perceived slight. There were plenty. One junior salesperson recounted how Marcus had dismissed her carefully prepared presentation as a pile of academic fluff. Another mentioned how he always took the prime client leads, regardless of the official distribution system. Each incident, though seemingly minor on its own, became another brick in the wall I was constructing around Marcus. I was accumulating data, concrete evidence to support my theoretical assertions. This wasn't personal, this was empirical. My actions did not go unnoticed. A few of my colleagues, particularly those in the less rigorous dements, began to express mild discomfort. Elias, the head of logistics, a man who appreciated Marcus's ability to move large volumes of product, approached me in the break room one afternoon. "Victoria," he said, stirring his herbal tea, "I hear you're coming down hard on Marcus. He's an acquired taste, certainly, but he does deliver. We're talking substantial shipments here. Are we sure we want to upset the apple cart?" I met his gaze, my own unwavering. "Elias, we are not upsetting anything. We are optimizing. An apple cart, to use your analogy, must have sound wheels and a reliable driver, not just a full load." Marcus's methods, while effective in isolation, create systemic weaknesses. His disregard for protocol, his abrasive manner, these chip away at morale. They risk our brand image, and they set a dangerous precedent. We cannot compromise our principles for short-term gains, no matter how lucrative. Elias merely nodded, looking unconvinced, but he knew better than to challenge my resolve directly. He understood, as I did, that my decisions were always couched in the unimpeachable language of corporate well-being and long-term sustainability. My control, I truly believed, was for the greater good. The pressure mounted as the quarterly sales review approached. Despite my interventions and Theft new, highly structured sales templates for the rest of the team, Marcus's numbers remained the dominant factor in our overall performance. Without him, the figures would look considerably less impressive. But I refused to let data blind me to principle. I had compiled a meticulous report for the Executive Governance Board, a comprehensive document detailing Marcus's repeated violations, the negative impact on team morale, as interpreted through my lens, and the systemic risks he posed. My presentation was flawless, graphs illustrating declining adherence to policy, testimonials, anonymized, of course, from disgruntled colleagues, and a clear articulation of how his toxic behavior undermined the very foundation of the Viridian Standard. I argued that allowing such an individual to continue, regardless of his sales figures, would be a betrayal of our commitment to a progressive, respectful, and ultimately, sustainable workplace culture. I presented my case with unshakable conviction, portraying myself as the guardian of the company's integrity. The Executive Governance Board, a collection of seasoned professionals who valued efficiency and profitability above all else, listened intently. There was a pause after my presentation, a heavy silence that spoke volumes. Mr. Alton, the CEO, cleared his throat. "Victoria," he began, his voice measured, "we acknowledge the concerns you've raised regarding Marcus's conduct. However, his contribution to our bottom line is, as you've noted, significant. Have we explored alternatives? A lateral move? A stricter mentorship program? We must consider the financial implications of losing such a prolific salesperson." I had anticipated this. "Mr. Alton, I have considered every alternative. Marcus has been issued multiple warnings. He has been offered coaching. He remains unrepentant and resistant to change. His sales figures, while impressive, come at an unacceptable cost to our organizational health. Furthermore, a stricter mentorship program would imply that the responsibility for his behavioral issues lies with someone else, not with his own unwillingness to adapt. I believe that for Viridian Oils to truly embody the values we espouse, we must demonstrate that no individual is above our core principles. This is a matter of long-term strategic integrity versus short-term tactical gain. If we compromise now, we erode the very foundation of the Viridian Standard and, frankly, my own ability to enforce it. My argument was compelling, built on an edifice of logic and policy. The board deliberated for what felt like an eternity, but in reality, was only a tense 15 minutes. When they emerged, their decision was unanimous. They had sided with the system, with my vision. Marcus was to be terminated. A quiet triumph settled over me. It wasn't about vengeance, it was about victory for the principle. I had proven that adherence to standards, to a rigorously defined ideal, was paramount. The messy, unpredictable human element had been disciplined, brought to heel by the unwavering force of bureaucratic will. I scheduled the termination meeting for the following afternoon. I would deliver the news myself, ensuring the process was handled with the utmost professionalism, every step meticulously documented, every legal clause precisely articulated. This was not a personal confrontation, it was the execution of a corporate imperative, a necessary surgical procedure to excise a cancerous anomaly from the body of Viridian Oils. The termination meeting itself was surprisingly subdued. Marcus sat across from me, flanked by his union representative, a stoic woman from the Workers' Solidarity Union, a fictional entity I had to grudgingly acknowledge. I recited the meticulously prepared statement, detailing the reasons for his termination, repeated violations of the Viridian Standard, failure to adhere to professional conduct guidelines, and the detrimental impact on team morale. His eyes, usually so full of defiant energy, were flat. He listened without interruption, his gaze fixed on my face, an unreadable expression on his features. When I finished, the union rep spoke first, questioning the validity of some of the claims, pointing to his long tenure and exceptional sales record. I calmly rebutted each point, armed with my comprehensive dossier of evidence, my legal team's input, and the Executive Governance Board's full endorsement. Marcus finally spoke, his voice low, devoid of its usual booming quality. "So, that's it then, Victoria?" 15 years, bringing in more business than half this sales team combined, and I'm out because I don't follow your rulebook to the letter. I maintained eye contact. "Marcus, your sales performance has been noted. However, the decision is final. Viridian Oils is committed to fostering a professional and respectful environment for all employees. Your conduct was incompatible with that commitment." He nodded slowly, a wry smile playing on his lips. "I see. Well, Victoria, I hope your professional and respectful environment keeps the lights on and the olive oil flowing. Because out there," he gestured vaguely towards the window, "the world doesn't always play by your rules. Sometimes you need a little grit, a little mess, to get things done." He stood, pushed in his chair with a deliberate movement, and walked out, his union representative trailing behind him. He didn't clear his desk, he didn't say goodbye to anyone. He simply vanished, leaving behind an unnerving silence, a void that was supposed to be filled with the promise of a more harmonious and efficient workplace. I felt a surge of professional satisfaction. The system had worked. The anomaly had been removed. Viridian Oils was now free to pursue its destiny, unburdened by toxicity. In the immediate aftermath, a strange calm settled over the sales office. The tension that Marcus's presence often generated was gone. No more booming voices, no more impromptu jokes, no more loud phone calls. The sales team, perhaps intimidated by the swift and decisive action, adhered strictly to the Viridian Standard. Their client calls were polite, formal, and utterly devoid of personality. Their reports were submitted on time, flawlessly formatted. I observed this new order with a sense of vindication. This was the environment I had envisioned, professional, predictable, and controlled. I held a brief team meeting, emphasizing the importance of collective responsibility and the exciting opportunity to collectively pick up the slack. I introduced new, even more detailed CRM protocols, believing that with enough structure, anyone could achieve Marcus's numbers, perhaps even surpass them, but with the added benefit of adherence to policy. Initially, the dip in sales was negligible. I attributed it to the natural transition period and confidently predicted a swift recovery as the remaining team members, now free from Marcus's shadow, stepped up. I even delivered a glowing report to the Executive Governance Board, highlighting the measurable improvement in workplace morale and adherence to the Viridian Standard. The short-term adjustment in sales figures is a necessary investment, I argued, for the long-term health and stability of Viridian Oils. We are now building a stronger, more resilient sales force, one that relies on systemic excellence rather than individualistic, unpredictable heroics. The board seemed cautiously optimistic, swayed by my data-rich presentation and unshakable conviction. However, beneath the surface of my controlled environment, subtle cracks began to appear. A few key clients, previously managed by Marcus, started to become less responsive. Emails went unanswered for longer, calls were redirected to voicemails. When my team followed up, the responses were polite but cool, indicating a sudden lack of warmth that had previously characterized these relationships. I dismissed these as minor hurdles. These clients simply need to be re-educated on our new service standards, I instructed my team. They were perhaps too accustomed to Marcus's informal approach. We must demonstrate the superior professionalism of our new methods. I developed new client re-engagement strategies, replete with carefully worded emails and follow-up scripts designed to reaffirm Viridian Oil's commitment to quality and service. Yet, the unease persisted. Sales figures for the following month showed a more significant decline, particularly in the premium olive oil segments where Marcus had been unicularly dominant. My new hires, while diligent and policy-compliant, simply couldn't replicate his unique ability to secure large, repeat orders from established, often eccentric, clients. They were following the script, but the magic, the inexplicable connection Marcus had forged, was missing. Whispers started circulating through the office, hushed conversations that ceased abruptly when I approached. I caught fragments of sentences. Aurora Olive Exports, Marcus, taking clients. I immediately shut down such speculation. Unfounded rumors, I declared in a team email, and highly unprofessional. We will not engage in baseless conjecture. Our focus remains on executing the Viridian standard with diligence and integrity. My blind spot, my inability to comprehend that individuals could operate outside or even against my meticulously designed systems, was now a gaping chasm. I believed that clients bought from Viridian Oils, the company, not from Marcus, the person. His personal relationships, his gruff charm, his toxic ability to cut through bureaucracy and connect on a deeply human level, were invisible to me. They were not quantifiable, not reducible to a data point, and therefore, in my worldview, not truly significant. I doubled down on my strategy, introducing even more stringent reporting requirements, more mandatory training sessions, more layers of approval for every sales action. I believed the problem was not my strategy, but insufficient adherence to it. The system needed more control, not less. The fiscal quarter ended, and the results were undeniable. Viridian Oils Corporation had missed its revenue target by a significant margin. The shortfall was not merely a transition period adjustment any longer, it was a glaring deficit, a gaping hole in our financial projections. The Executive Governance Board convened an emergency meeting. The atmosphere was palpably tense, heavy with unspoken accusations. I entered the boardroom, my reports in hand, ready to defend my actions. I would attribute the shortfall to market fluctuations, to an unexpected economic downturn, to any external factor I could logically explain. I could not, concede that my policies were at fault. Mr. Alton, the CEO, sat at the head of the table, his usual genial expression replaced by a stern, unyielding gaze. Victoria, he began, his voice devoid of its usual warmth, we need to understand what happened here. Our projections were robust. This shortfall is unprecedented. I launched into my defense, citing economic indicators, presenting analyses of competitor performance, even suggesting a slight dip in global olive oil demand. I reiterated my commitment to the Viridian standard, emphasizing the long-term benefits of a streamlined, professional sales force. We have eliminated a toxic element, Mr. Alton, I concluded, and while there is a temporary adjustment, the structural integrity of our sales operation is stronger than ever. This is a strategic investment in our future. Mr. Demmer, the chief financial officer, a man whose numbers never lied, steepled his fingers. Victoria, Your commitment to process is commendable. However, our numbers tell a different story. We've lost 5 major accounts in the last 2 months. Apollo Culinary Supplies, Golden Grove's Distribution, Mediterranean Delights, all key clients. And they've all moved their business to Aurora Olive Exports. My breath caught in my throat. Aurora Olive Exports. The name Marcus's former colleagues had whispered. We have reason to believe, Mr. Demir continued, his voice heavy, that Marcus, your toxic element, is now the head of sales for Aurora Olive Exports. And it appears he took his entire client portfolio with him. A wave of disbelief washed over me, cold and sharp. My theories, my meticulously constructed arguments, suddenly felt flimsy, exposed. That's impossible, I managed, my voice thin. He had a non-compete clause. And clients buy from companies, not individuals. Mr. Alton leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine. Victoria, Marcus's non-compete was notoriously weak, a relic from before your tenure. And while clients should buy from companies, in the real world, especially in an industry built on relationships and trust, people often buy from people they know, people they like, people they've done business with for years. Marcus cultivated those relationships. He may have been crude, he may have violated every single one of your standards, but he had a loyalty that our system failed to account for. He continued, delivering the crushing blow. We've had direct feedback from several of these clients. They explicitly stated they were following Marcus. They felt a personal connection to him that they simply do not feel with our new, highly standardized approach. They found our new process impersonal, even cold. My mind reeled. Impersonal. Cold. These were the very qualities I had, in my relentless pursuit of objectivity and professionalism, cultivated. I had seen them as strengths, as safeguards against emotional entanglement and irrational decision-making. Now, they were weapons turned against me. The right thing I had done, the toxic element I had purged, had not only backfired spectacularly, but had actively enriched our primary competitor. My system, my perfect system, had failed. It had not accounted for the messy, unpredictable, and ultimately indispensable variable of human connection. I stood there, utterly exposed, my carefully constructed world of logic and policy crumbling around me. I had been so focused on the how that I had completely lost sight of the what and the who. The fallout was swift and brutal. I wasn't outright fired, a concession I attributed to my flawless academic background and the Executive Governance Board's reluctance to admit such a significant misjudgment publicly. Instead, my role was realigned. The Director of Business Optimization became the Senior Policy Analyst, a glorified title for someone who was effectively sidelined, relegated to drafting internal white papers and refining protocols that now felt utterly meaningless. My power was stripped, my influence vanished. The Executive Governance Board subtly but firmly shifted focus, prioritizing a relationship-centric sales model that explicitly sought to recruit individuals with strong personal networks, valuing practical experience and client rapport above strict adherence to my beloved Viridian standard. I remained in my minimalist office, surrounded by the policies I had crafted, the systems I had designed, but they felt hollow, ghost-like. My carefully constructed tower of independence, my pride in self-sufficiency, now felt like a prison. I had insulated myself so thoroughly against vulnerability and emotional messiness that I had also cut myself off from human warmth, from the very connections that made life and business thrive. One evening, weeks after my demotion, I was scrolling through a business news feed, an almost masochistic habit born of my need to understand the world that had so profoundly rejected my theories. There, prominently featured in an article about Aurora Olive Exports' unexpected surge in market share, was a photograph of Marcus. He was standing on a sun-drenched terrace, a glass of wine in hand, surrounded by a group of smiling, boisterous clients, including the old man from Apollo Culinary Supplies. He looked genuinely happy, his rough edges still apparent, but now framed as a mark of authenticity. The caption lauded his unconventional yet highly effective approach to client relations and his personal touch that clients adore. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth, sharper than any olive oil. My toxic problem had become our rival's greatest asset. I thought of my life, my pristine aimant, my meticulously planned schedule, my lack of any real emotional entanglement. I had achieved the independence I so fiercely pursued, but it felt empty, a victory without joy. I had defined success by my own rigid standards, then imposed those standards on a world that stubbornly refused to conform. I had built a fortress of logic and control, only to find myself utterly alone within its walls. The image of Marcus, surrounded by people, his face alight with genuine connection, pierced through my carefully constructed armor. He was successful, not despite his messiness, but perhaps because of it. He had chosen connection while I had chosen control. And in that moment, I understood, with a crushing, tragic clarity, that my right way had led me to a cold, solitary triumph, while his wrong way had led him to warmth, success, and a life that, despite its imperfections, felt undeniably full. The silence of my office was no longer a sign of professional order. It was the echo of my profound, irreversible loneliness.